The Invisible Contract. Chapter 1: The Rules You Never Remember Agreeing to. There are rules you follow every day that nobody ever taught you. You don't remember signing them. Nobody sat you down and explained them. Yet somehow, they became deeply embedded in the way you love, argue, work, apologize, withdraw, and ask for what you need. Don't be difficult. Don't need too much. Keep everyone happy. Be useful. Never depend on anyone. Don't show weakness. If someone is pulling away, try harder. The strange thing is that these rules can feel like personality. You might call yourself independent, easygoing, loyal, responsible, low maintenance, ambitious, sensitive, strong. But what if some of those qualities began as adaptations? What if, somewhere along the way, you learned that behaving a certain way made relationships safer and your brain never stopped following the rule? This is where psychology becomes deeply personal. Because sometimes the patterns causing the most difficulty in our adult lives are not the patterns that once hurt us. They are the patterns that once protected us. The contracts we make without knowing. Imagine a child growing up in a home where emotions are unpredictable. Some days, a parent is warm and attentive. Other days, they are distant, irritated, or overwhelmed. The child doesn't understand adult stress, financial pressure, exhaustion, or emotional immaturity. They understand something much simpler. When the adults are happy, everything feels safe. So the child begins watching. They learn to recognize footsteps. They notice changes in facial expressions. They become unusually sensitive to tone of voice. They learn when to ask for something and when not to. Eventually, a quiet internal rule develops. If I can keep everyone calm, I'll be safe. Nobody teaches this explicitly. The child's nervous system teaches it through repetition. And years later, that child may become an adult who walks into every room and immediately notices who is uncomfortable. They know when someone is upset before the person says anything. They apologize quickly. They hate disappointing people. They feel responsible for other people's moods. And they may even be praised for it. You're so thoughtful. You're incredibly mature. You're the person everyone can rely on. All of those things may be true. But there is another question worth asking. How much does it cost you to be that person? Your brain is always learning what keeps you safe. The human brain is not simply trying to make you happy. It is trying to predict what happens next. That distinction matters. Your nervous system is constantly gathering information about your environment and updating its expectations. If reaching out usually leads to warmth, you learn that connection is relatively safe. If reaching out sometimes leads to rejection, your brain becomes more cautious. If expressing anger repeatedly results in punishment or withdrawal, you may learn to suppress anger. If achievement consistently brings approval, achievement can become connected to worth. If people become unpredictable when you need them, independence may begin to feel safer than dependence. This is part of emotional conditioning. The brain notices patterns. And once a pattern has been repeated enough, you don't need to consciously think about it. You simply act. That is why some emotional reactions feel strangely automatic. You aren't sitting there deciding, today I will abandon my own needs in order to prevent someone else from becoming disappointed. You just say yes. You aren't consciously thinking, I will interpret this delayed text as evidence that I'm being rejected. You simply feel the anxiety. You aren't deliberately choosing, I will become emotionally distant whenever intimacy begins to feel threatening. You just become quieter. The behavior can happen before the explanation. Because the nervous system often reacts to perceived danger before the conscious mind has finished interpreting the situation. The invisible contract. This is where the idea of an invisible contract becomes useful. An invisible contract is an internal psychological agreement about what you must do in order to receive something you need. Love, safety, approval, belonging. Respect. Connection. The contract might sound like, I will be useful, and you won't abandon me. Or, I won't ask for much, and you won't become overwhelmed by me. Or, I will never depend on you, and therefore you will never have enough power to hurt me. Or, I will achieve something impressive, and then I'll finally deserve respect. Or, I will understand everyone's behavior, so nobody has to understand mine. The contract is usually not conscious. That's what makes it powerful. You don't experience it as a rule. You experience it as the way things are. The child who became easy to love. Consider someone named Anna. Anna grew up in a family where conflict was exhausting. Whenever she complained, someone would tell her she was being dramatic. Whenever she was angry, she was told to calm down. Whenever she needed attention, there always seemed to be something more important happening. So Anna learned something. Being easy was safer. She became agreeable. She stopped asking for much. She became the person who said, "It's okay," even when it wasn't. Years later, Anna enters a relationship with someone who genuinely loves her. Her partner asks, "What do you want to do tonight?" Anna says, "Whatever you want." "Are you upset?" "No, I'm fine." "You seemed uncomfortable when I said that." "It's nothing." Eventually, her partner becomes frustrated. "I don't know what you actually want." Anna doesn't understand. She has spent her entire life believing that not being difficult was a virtue. And it is a virtue until it becomes a way of disappearing. This is one of the crueler psychological paradoxes. The strategy that helped you maintain connection can eventually prevent genuine connection. Because intimacy requires another person to actually know you. Not the convenient version. Not the endlessly understanding version. Not the version who never needs anything. You. When independence becomes armor. Now consider another person. James learned early that depending on others was dangerous. Whenever he needed comfort, people were unavailable. Whenever he trusted someone, they eventually disappointed him. So he developed a powerful internal rule. Need nobody. As an adult, James is highly capable. He handles problems alone. He rarely asks for help. He is proud of being self-sufficient. Friends admire him. Partners sometimes don't know how to get close to him. When someone says, "You can tell me what's wrong," he responds, "Nothing's wrong." When someone offers help, "I've got it." When a relationship becomes emotionally intimate, something strange happens. He starts feeling trapped. He needs more space. He becomes irritated by emotional conversations. He may even begin convincing himself that the other person is simply too needy. But beneath the irritation can be something much more vulnerable. Dependence feels dangerous. So independence becomes more than a preference. It becomes armor. And armor is useful when you're under attack. It becomes a problem when you're trying to hug someone. Why familiar pain can feel safer than healthy love. This helps explain one of the most confusing experiences in relationships. Why do people sometimes return to situations that clearly hurt them? The answer isn't always that they don't know their worth. Human beings are strongly influenced by familiarity. The brain builds predictions from previous experiences. When something resembles what we already know, it can feel strangely understandable even when it isn't healthy. This is one reason unpredictable relationships can become psychologically consuming. When affection alternates with distance, the uncertainty itself can intensify attention. You wait for the next message. You analyze the change in tone. You wonder what you did wrong. Then comes reassurance. Relief floods in. For a moment, everything feels okay again. That relief can become powerful reinforcement. The brain learns. The uncertainty is painful, but the reunion feels incredibly rewarding. And so the cycle continues. This doesn't mean every difficult relationship creates an addiction. Nor does it mean people consciously choose unhealthy partners. It means that learning systems are complicated. Sometimes the nervous system confuses familiarity with safety. And sometimes it confuses intensity with intimacy. They are not the same thing. The hidden cost of being the strong one. There is another invisible contract that appears everywhere. I will take care of everyone else, and then I won't have to face how much I need. You see it in the dependable friend, the older sibling, the employee who never complains, the partner who absorbs every crisis, the person everyone calls when something goes wrong. They seem resilient. But resilience and emotional self-neglect can look remarkably similar from a distance. A person can be extremely capable while being profoundly disconnected from their own needs. They know how to solve problems. They don't know how to receive comfort. They can support everyone. They struggle to say, I need support too. They can tolerate enormous amounts of stress. But the moment someone asks them how they actually feel, they become uncomfortable. I'm fine. Sometimes the strongest looking person in the room is simply the person who learned earliest that nobody was coming. Your past does not have to be dramatic to matter. This is important. Psychological conditioning does not require an extraordinary childhood. You do not need to have experienced obvious trauma for your early relationships to influence your emotional patterns. Sometimes the environment was loving but emotionally limited. Maybe your parents provided everything materially but rarely discussed feelings. Maybe vulnerability was uncomfortable. Maybe achievement received more attention than effort. Maybe anger was treated as disrespect. Maybe sadness was met with solutions instead of understanding. Maybe nobody meant to teach you anything at all. Children are constantly interpreting their environment. They are asking, without words, what gets me closeness? What makes people pull away? What emotions are acceptable here? What happens when I need something? Who am I allowed to be? The answers become part of the child's developing model of relationships. And those models can travel remarkably far into adulthood. The contract can become your identity. This is perhaps the most difficult part. Eventually, you stop remembering that the behavior was once an adaptation. You simply think, that's who I am. I'm just independent. I'm just sensitive. I'm just a perfectionist. I'm just someone who hates conflict. I'm just very loyal. I'm just bad at asking for help. I'm just not very emotional. I'm just someone who needs reassurance. I'm just a private person. Sometimes those descriptions are accurate. But sometimes they are incomplete. The better question isn't, is this who I am? It is. What happens inside me when I don't behave this way? If saying no produces overwhelming guilt, that's worth examining. If asking for help creates shame, that's worth examining. If someone being disappointed with you feels almost unbearable, that's worth examining. If intimacy makes you want to disappear, that's worth examining. If someone pulling away makes you feel that you must chase them, that's worth examining. The reaction itself contains information. The moment the contract becomes visible, awareness doesn't immediately erase a pattern. In fact, noticing it can initially make things uncomfortable. You might recognize, I keep saying yes because I'm afraid people won't like me if I say no. I don't actually want to be alone. I'm afraid of needing someone. I keep trying to earn affection from people who give it inconsistently. I call myself ambitious, but I'm terrified of being ordinary. I thought I was patient. Maybe I've learned to tolerate things I shouldn't. These realizations can hurt. Because changing a pattern sometimes means grieving the reason you developed it. You may have to acknowledge that the behavior once made sense. That younger version of you wasn't stupid. They weren't weak. They were adapting with the information available to them. The goal isn't to hate the person you used to be. The goal is to stop making them run your adult life. How to start rewriting the contract. You don't rewrite an invisible contract by simply telling yourself to love yourself more. You rewrite it through small experiences that teach your nervous system something different. Start by identifying one recurring rule. Complete this sentence. In order to be loved, accepted, safe, or respected, I believe I have to underscore. Don't overthink it. Write the first answer that feels uncomfortable. Maybe. Be useful. Never get angry. Be attractive. Be successful. Never need anyone. Keep people happy. Always understand. Never make mistakes. Then ask, where did I learn this? You don't need a perfect memory. Look for patterns. Who reacted strongly when you expressed yourself? What happened when you disappointed someone? What happened when you needed comfort? What earned praise? What created conflict? What version of you seemed to receive the most acceptance? Then ask a more difficult question. Is this rule still necessary? Not. Is this rule completely irrational? But. Does this rule still protect me in the life I have now? Because the contract may have been written under completely different circumstances. You may no longer be the child who had no power. You may no longer live in the environment where the rule was created. You may now have choices, boundaries, resources, support, a voice. And yet your nervous system may still behave as though nothing has changed. Try breaking one small rule. Don't begin with the most frightening change. Choose something small. If your contract says I must always be available, delay answering a non-urgent message. If it says I must never disappoint people, politely decline something you genuinely don't want to do. If it says I must handle everything alone, ask someone you trust for a small favor. If it says I must hide negative emotions, tell someone. That actually hurt me. Then notice what happens inside you. The goal isn't to eliminate discomfort. The discomfort is part of the experiment. Your brain needs an opportunity to discover. I can say no and survive the guilt. Someone can be disappointed and still love me. I can need someone without losing myself. I can express anger without destroying a relationship. I can make a mistake without becoming worthless. These are not affirmations. They are experiences. And experiences are often what change deeply learned emotional predictions. A different kind of question. We often ask, what's wrong with me? Why am I so anxious? Why do I overthink? Why do I keep choosing unavailable people? Why can't I set boundaries? Why do I push people away? Why do I need so much reassurance? But there may be a more useful question. What is this behavior trying to protect me from? Suddenly, the behavior becomes information. Overthinking may be trying to protect you from uncertainty. People-pleasing may be trying to protect you from rejection. Perfectionism may be trying to protect you from shame. Emotional distance may be trying to protect you from dependence. Control may be trying to protect you from helplessness. Constant achievement may be trying to protect you from feeling inadequate. None of this means the behavior is healthy. Understanding a defense does not mean surrendering to it. It means you can finally stop fighting yourself long enough to understand what your mind has been trying to accomplish. The contract you can rewrite. Perhaps growing emotionally is not about becoming a completely different person. Perhaps it is about becoming free enough to choose which parts of yourself you still want to keep. You can remain generous without being endlessly available. You can be independent without refusing intimacy. You can be ambitious without making achievement the price of self-respect. You can care about other people's feelings without taking responsibility for them. You can love someone without abandoning yourself. You can disappoint people without becoming a bad person. And you can need others without becoming weak. The deepest psychological change often begins when we stop asking, "How do I get rid of this part of myself?" and start asking, "When did this part of me become necessary?" Because behind many adult patterns is an intelligent younger mind that was simply trying to solve a problem. It found a strategy. The strategy worked. You survived. And then life changed. But the rule remained. That is the invisible contract. And perhaps the first step toward emotional freedom is not breaking it. It is finally realizing that you are allowed to renegotiate the terms.